been such a powerful story. I do think it's really good for us to hear kind of the real challenge that goes on, obviously, in the trust and the nurses and doctors and the right team. So really good to hear. So thank you very much.
Would you recognise that hard story to him? But I think you could see on the face how difficult she was for them opportunities in the care. Yes, it's very important to think about that.
As her journeys and tell that story, I think really important. Lovely. So we shall move on to the meat and potatoes. So minutes of the trust. Have we got any amendments or amendments or additions or things that are missing from the minutes that anybody wants to raise? In the minutes, so are we all happy with the minutes? I'm looking around. Everyone right? Okay, so we are approving the minutes of the meeting from the 4th of July. And let me just pull up on matters arising, just so I've got them in front of me. So I think it's the one on here is number 36, so the risk seminar, and the one at the bottom about board assurance framework. I'll look to Kate to tell me I'm wrong, but I think what we're sort of saying is that come October seminar, we're probably going to have an objectives and therefore potential risks conversation, but we'll build out from there. Is that where we're? Yes. So I think to some extent this sits open. Yes, because we're talking about refreshing our. So is there anything anybody wants to add on those two, Kate, in terms of the comments and the action plan?
Yeah, I think we can hopefully close after the seminar.
Okay, lovely. So number 2, the EDI. So we've got the annual EDI report on the agenda. Is that where, or would you like to say anything there, Joe?
So slightly more than that, and I don't know if you want to talk about it or happy to around next steps in engaging Yvonne Coghill.
Yes. So I've spoken to Yvonne this week, or emailed with Yvonne this week, because I wanted to kind of check out how much time we were going to need to be using through October and November, because we've obviously got other things we want to do as a board team together, particularly at this time when we know we've got a challenge. So Yvonne said, can't bite it off all in one go. We need to do it kind of in bite-sized pieces. She was talking about a couple of hours at a time. So the plan I've offered back to her is that the seminar in October that we would start with, Yvonne, we do 10 till 12 teamwork around that. We're going to be at Whitton Gate. And then we can use the rest of the time of the seminar to continue with the objective discussion and the risk discussion. And then in November, where we've obviously got public board meeting in the morning, I've offered the afternoon session about 12:30. I've said to Yvonne to come and do her second session. And I think from there, with her, we'll agree how we're going to take that forward and what that looks like for us as a board.
And just to then connect in the other pieces of work, our new Chief People Officer starts. I'm not sure we formally introduced Louise. Blame me.
Blame you.
So we have Louise Helpley here as our Chief People Officer until Catherine starts at the beginning of October. And the plan is for Catherine to lead on the work that has been identified already through the other two pieces of work that come to the board, and then connect that into the work that we will pick up with Yvonne. So it becomes a single piece of work rather than these different work streams that we had.
And then the serious incident learning, we've got, well, it's completed in terms of the staff survey questions, isn't it? I think on here we're happy that it's completed and recommended to close. So anything
so there's enough questions and enough data coming from the National Staff Survey to help us know whether our environment is conducive or not to recording.
Anything you wanted to ask or add? Well, I think we are happy that that is being closed. Finance report. So this is about provide a selection regime, which I think we're doing.
Yeah, I'm going to bring something to the October board on that one.
Thank you. So we'll probably be able to, that will be ongoing really, won't it? But we'll probably be closing it.
Yeah, I think what we did was kind of a briefing around what it means for us, the consequences. But you're right, it will be an ongoing process for us.
Thank you very much. We've talked about, oh yeah, this is completed. This was due to the absence of this going on ED. Ian, I don't know if you want to, or is it Emma? Ian's not here. I don't know whether else we talked about the emergency department ASH risk.
So the current map is updated and it reflects a conversation Emma's had with all.
Yeah, so I think, and the last one comes in with the first one where we said we're going to do risk going forward. So if everyone's happy, is anyone thinking anything's missing from the action log? I couldn't see anything which been lovely. Okay, thank you very much. So we can move on to Chair's report. I haven't got loads. I'm just obviously hoping I've had some holiday. I hope everyone's managed to have some time off over summer as we go into autumn and winter. I have met with Paul Viewers on risk, so I've had a good a session with him just to talk to him about the wider risk register across the hospital, which was good. We've got two governors who are stepping away as they've themselves got exciting opportunities. So Rachel stepping away and Kat is stepping away, both good governors, and we'll be very sorry to see them go, but they're going to be doing exciting new things themselves in the future. So we will recruit again. Kenny and I have talked about the challenge of getting, and we've talked with the governors, getting a consistent governor body where we can keep developing the conversation. But I think all the process and work that Kenny and Timmy have put in place of engaging and inducting new governors means that will flow really well as we go forward. So I think they themselves recognise that we will be able to include and roll forward new people in a better way, I think, going forward in the months. And we're long listing for the qualified finance NED applicant this week. Can't remember what day now. Today is today, isn't it? Yes, we are. So that's good. And I did mention, I think, at governor's meeting, but I did a great walk around with Caroline Kintu, who's a community wellbeing midwife. But we walked around a lot of midwifery level with neonatal care. It was an excellent walk around. It was really good to meet the team and staff in different places and understand what they're doing and the work that they're undertaking. So it's good. And I've got a couple of things that I'll mention starting in the private meeting. But Joe, I can hand over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chair. So a few things from me. I'll pass you over to Kate in a minute to talk about the comms audit, and I'll ask John to update on the site developments that are going on. But from an operational management perspective, there has continued to be a huge amount of work going on to reduce overall waiting times across the organisation. And as you know, we are in a position whereby our patients are waiting longer than we would like them to wait. We have been commissioning the private sector to do quite a bit of work for us and with us, as well as asking our own clinicians to do additional waiting list initiative work. That is starting to make a real impact in the position, and we hope by the end of September that we have stabilised and are very clear about when we will have treated all of our over 65-week waiters. We'll come and talk about that a bit later on. In terms of other things that have been going on since the last time we met, I have now sat down with two of our three new MPs, and they are very supportive of the health and care system and indeed the hospital itself, and recognise their potential role and are now supporting us for the new hospital programme, which is very helpful. And they are keen to make sure that they are supportive of the overall development of the hospital in the context of where Milton Keynes as a city is looking to develop over the next number of years. So I think they recognise the very strong partnership we have with our council and recognise that they are a key part of supporting us over the next few years, which is really helpful. Kate, do you want to talk about the comms audit that was launched?
Yes, we've done an internal communications audit with a view to reviewing and evaluating the effectiveness of all of our internal communications channels and what we might look to do in the future. I think as our organisation grows and increasingly grows and becomes more and more diverse in the way that people work across different sites and at home, we're looking at how we communicate and engage people well, what works, what doesn't work, how we hear voices that are not often heard in the organisation, and how we sort of spend our time communicating what people value and appreciate. what works well with them. So we'll have some, the audit's been running for about a week. We'll gather that information up and it will come back to the common strategy.
And I would urge our non-executive colleagues to get involved in that, if at all possible. If you haven't still got the link, then we will get it to you later on today. Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about how the site is turning into a building site?
Yes, can do that. So,
Positive reasons, of course.
possibly. So we are now underway with all three of our enabling projects for the program. And the key date is going to be 16th of September. The behind us, where the third multi-story car park is going to be. The first steel should be erected on the 16th of September, so we'll see that growing out of the ground quite quickly. We've already shut off that car park for staff, so that's a loss of about 110 spaces. There is an enabling project which doesn't really affect the site, which is about bringing a larger electricity supply to the site. That is underway by national providers. The imaging centre has started. We should agree the comms for the hoarding over the next few days, and we are today starting the soft strip of the building. Everything these days, you can't take a giant wrecking balls with it now. You've got to dismantle everything and recycle. So we've started the recycling of the building itself, and in a small period of time, start seeing the building itself come down, and we've rerouted all the cables. Nearly all the hospitals, they have all the hospitals copper cables from telephones underneath that. And fibers as well, so they're all being done over the next few days. The copper is about to be. We will also see, subject to approval by this board this afternoon, Oak House wards starting, and that would mean a loss of more car parking. On magical 16th of September, we will open a new temporary car park, which is where the helipad currently is, which will take 68 cars. And in fact, some of the matting for it, we're placing sort of like festival matting on top of the grass. Some of that arrived last week, some of it is arriving today, and we'll start to make that available for staff. CNWL has been really helpful and are limiting the number of staff that they come to site. So that's going to provide some release on car parking. We haven't quite got to the end of a consultation on encouraging staff to temporarily move to the gate. Car parking is going to be difficult on site. And I'm sure over a period of time it is likely to affect visitor car parking as well. So it may well be that there will be some noise about that. Everything else on the NHP programme is going well. We are waiting for the final review, which the Secretary of State asked for in terms of who goes when, but we are hopeful that Millkeith will be one of the first projects to go.
So just building on that and then a couple of other things, that is circa a £40 million investment in our site as part of the new hospital development programme. So it's not to be underestimated, and there will no doubt be some concerns raised over the next year or so as we develop the site. And I think it's important for this board to note that there will be some pinch points, but as my mum used to say, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, and we are doing everything that we can to mitigate the risks and the challenges that we face. And there are going to be some difficult times ahead, so it's worth noting that as a board.
Question on that. So obviously, I'm hearing from the team on Flooring Hospital and talking with the exec team as well. Ongoing. If I'm looking at Louise, I don't know, I'm looking at Liz, I'm throwing them. But I suppose, as you say, there's going to be pressure. Have they got a kind of forum where people can constantly feedback, if there is particular pressure either for a large cohort or for themselves as individuals, it would be good, I think, for the board to hear that we do have that sort of facility open. Joe, if you will, or Louise wants to.
Yeah. So if I take it, and you can correct me when I get it wrong, Louise. We have a fortnightly town hall, which is open to all staff. It is an opportunity for people to ask any questions they like, and they do. And they can ask those questions anonymously or with name. And that's normally run by myself and another exec, but certainly it's always two execs. We also have the Ask Joe facility, which is on the intranet, which is obviously a 24/7 facility that people can use. And I think part of why Kate talked about the comms audit earlier on is that we know that the scale of change is significant. We know that our organisation is changing in terms of size. And so we are continuing to challenge ourselves about whether we are doing everything that we can and should be doing to communicate with all of the different groups that we have here on site. So I think, yes, there is no doubt that we will need to do more. And we're going to continually test ourselves about whether we're doing sufficient now.
So, yeah, I think one of the things we'd like to introduce is some dedicated forums for these issues, so they don't sort of explode out to the organisation and then go to multiple people at multiple times and get lots of, and again, it creates some it creates the capacity for people to get the wrong information at the wrong time, or for rumours to sort of multiply. So we're looking, that's some of the reasons Joe mentioned to do this audit, to say actually, do people need a dedicated forum for different things? We find that people prefer to post questions because they've got the ability to do that anonymously rather than do it in a big face-to-face forum. But we can keep working on that and looking at how we can do that differently. I think actually this is something that Kerry said to me recently, and we're doing this next month, that going out and actively being, having more of our management time at Whittingate and board presence, etc., and enable people to have conversations with people and to raise issues more informally as well.
Thank you. Just in relation to, so obviously you mentioned that there are likely to be disruptions and pinch points and such. But what is the nature of those disruptions? And look, we've talked about the impact on the staff members. But is there going to be potential impact on patient care and delivery services?
So a couple of things. If I hand over to John.
So for staff members, these are things like car parking. It's also visitors where we're moving, for example, some disabled spaces. There is going to be some noise when we start, especially during the demolition phase. We have a large
noise rather than
actual noise, dust, and a little bit of vibration as we cut up a huge concrete foundation. And that will be mostly localized to all the places you would want to do it, labour ward, neonatal, places like that, Ward 22. So there is inevitably some building noise, and as you will know if you've ever bought a new house, that where there are builders there is dust, and that will be a problem. So we're trying to minimise that wherever we possibly can, but where there are builders and building sites, there's noise, there's dust, there's some vibration, and we have to try and manage that as best we can.
So building on that, I think there are a couple of things. One is that we have been in a luxurious position as an organisation with car parking. Let's be clear about that. And I think we have to be clear with members of the team here that it is their responsibility to turn up to work on time. And it may actually require a little bit more extra time to park your car in the morning. But we cannot allow patient safety or the care that we deliver here be impacted because some of the luxurious elements we have are going to be impacted in the short term. And I think that's a really interesting message for our organisation. I think the second thing, coming back to what Kate said, is that we do hear a lot about some of the sort of personal impacts on members of staff around things like car parking and when is the pay award going to come, and exciting things like pigeon excrement in the car park. We don't hear enough about patient safety. And we don't hear enough about the quality of care that we are providing here from members of staff who may or may not have concerns or want to shout about the great things. And so somehow providing a forum for individuals to take some of these less important, and I mean that in a considered way, the less important issues out so that we can focus on what our core business is, which is looking after our patients, is really, really important. And that's where we want to go with this.
So there will be a similar strategy for communication with the patients as well as.
Yeah, so I need to bring a communications strategy and program back to the board. So there's a lot of engagement work that's been going on with different patient groups through different avenues. We're pulling work together at the moment to bring back as one strategy.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, mine was on car parking as well. So I think also it's predictable. I went through some of this at the L&D with their new visitor car parking. Can we demonstrate that we've done as much as possible to find alternatives to alleviate the reduction in spaces? So when we are challenged, it's inevitable. We can say, well, we've exhausted this opportunity, we've looked at that opportunity, but it was too expensive. We looked at that one, but it was impact. But we can satisfy ourselves when challenged in 3 to 6 months.
So initially we have just added some 30 additional visitor spaces that were at the site for the innovative therapy, and that has transformed that area actually. So people had been parking on curbs and things. Now actually, if you go at their really busy times, which tend to be sort of 4 o'clock-ish, you will see that there's usually a few spaces there. Fiona did have a complaint from a patient the other day. Was it Helen? It was Helen who had a complaint. Sorry, Helen. About a patient who said they couldn't park, and Helen and I walked around multi-story car park at the same time of the afternoon that they said they couldn't park. We found about 50 empty spaces. So we have to try and make sure that people are aware of where they can park. But right now, visitors have a pretty easy time in parking. We will go back and check because the last couple of weeks still have been in sort of school holiday time and all start taking their holidays. There are probably fewer patients on site, but over the next probably next week we'll be able to go around and actually see what the true state of this parking is. But right now it is pretty good for staff as well. For those of you who know the area very well, Pear Tree Bridge car park has been about half closed for many months because of the water main failure and some subsidence. That's all gone now. It's been mended, so that car park is fully open mostly. We're going to try and keep contracting off this site and out of Pear Tree as well, and it'll be for the contractor to arrange sort of take plus their staff in, because what we don't want is we start building instead of lots of contractors.
So it'll be good to keep it. Oh, sorry, Helen.
So I just wanted to add to John's point, because we are aware that maybe sometimes patients have an expectation if they come frequently, they've been always able to park. So we're looking to add something into the appointment letters. It's particularly outpatients, and also to get the booking teams when they're booking, just to advise patients to leave a little bit of extra time to enable them to drive around the site and identify a space. So just while this period of time, so that people don't turn up at the last minute and expect to find the first available space.
It's really reassuring to hear all the action you're taking. I'm sure we'll talk about that. Joe, I think you've got some more.
Just a couple of other things. We have received results of our inpatient survey, and although it was a very small cohort that responded this time around, we were in the upper quartile. We're now around about average nationally, but there was a story that was published which said that we were one of the worst declining trusts, which made us look awful. The reality is we sort of come back into the pack. Not a place we like being, and we'll do things about that, but just in case you hear, it's the usual damn rise in statistics, but some improvement work that we know we need to do there. And then the other thing to say was that we held an ED&I festival on the 16th of August, where we had a significant number of workshops and representation from across the organisation, which was great. And that has gone into supporting the production of the Workforce Race Equality Standard, Disability Equality Standard Action Plan. So that has been really helpful in informing that.
Did you want to just, we're just noting the LMK report?
Yes, and also nothing particular that we want to
comment on.
No,
No, so I think it's mostly good note, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we can move to the patient safety update. Ian, take your
Thank you. So page 25 in the pack. So there's a 12-page report here providing a patient safety update. Just to remind everybody, we have now transitioned from the old way of doing things to PISA. We started that across the trust on 1st of May. There is a bit of complexity because there are still some cases in the old system working their way through. And I'm really interested in comments from the board, either now or outside the meeting, or indeed a Quality and Clinical Risk Committee when we meet in 10 days' time, about whether this report does the job in terms of keeping the board aware of safety issues, aware of patient safety work, and most importantly, assured in those areas. So, just by way of background, we have reported roughly 900 incidents per month in the trust, and about 2/3 of those relate to patient safety. There's the figures that are here in the report. And of those incidents, 600 or so patient safety incidents, less than 0.5% of those have been, response to less than 0.5% of those has been what's called a patient safety investigation, which essentially is similar to the old definitions of an SI, i.e. a unique particular incident where there is capability for learning that leads to that sort of report. And then in approximately 14 or 15% of the incidents, clinical incidents reported, they have triggered a patient safety learning response of some sort, appendix, what those different responses are, i.e. huddles, MDT meeting, etc. I think there are probably 3 or 4 things I want to highlight in the report. First is on page 3 and 12, which is that Venn diagram, really, just trying to describe the important role of triage in this process. And one of the most important things around PISA is that when an incident is reported, is looked at very quickly by a multi-professional team who decide what to do with it, and also importantly feedback to the reporter so that that's an incident they're reporting. There's a daily triage meeting at the trust level. Some of the incidents, because of the way they've been reported by individuals, the natural response is we need more information about this to understand it better. That's what's called a category 4 response at this triage meeting. Those incidents then go back to MDTs or huddles, areas, and they basically have a week to respond. So there is a bit of a risk, and we'll recall in the old days, we used to occasionally have issues with incidents we hadn't closed. There is a risk potentially that incidents could sit in that space with the local directorate safety huddles. We're working hard to make sure. And the graphs on page 4, so really about incident reporting. So really conscious there's been lots of changes around incident reporting. There's been the radar system, there's been the learning from patient safety events form, which is a national form, and now we've got PISA. So lots and lots of change. That graph, I hope, gives everybody assurance that the incident reporting rate, if anything is going up, it certainly isn't going down. And let's all remember that incident reporting will be as high as possible with relatively low harm from the incidents that are reported. Page 5 describes these 8 incidents that have taken place since we launched PISA, which have resulted in a patient safety incident response, i.e. the more intensive form of investigation. Those 8 are there to read. One that's of particular concern is a never event reported in August, which relates to a bone marrow procedure conducted on. And it's currently going investigation, and as we speak, I believe there's a team with the team involved to understand various different perspectives here. It's a no harm event. Later on in the report, page 7 onwards, there's some information about the sort of information, key messages that go back out to the organisation, either through directorate meetings, wider comms around some of the themes that are emerging. Particularly importantly on page 9 of 12, obviously of staff feedback from these learning events. Lots and lots of staff have been engaged by the patient safety team, which is a growing team. And lots of staff have been engaged as a result of incidents reported for thematic work. Responses from those staff have been very positive. So that is the report. There's quite a lot of information in there. As I say, I'm now we're outside of the team. We really need to understand whether this hits the mark or not in terms of reporting format.
Any questions or comments, Joe?
Excuse me, thanks, Ian. On page 5, that table there, I'm sure this is the national criteria, but the safety priority, where it's saying none, that's not our definition. Correct. So they are serious events, but there isn't a definition at the moment that we can. So deteriorating patient is a recognised definition that we can put. I wouldn't want the non-execs to read none and think this is trivial and it's irrelevant. It's a serious event, but it doesn't fit into the category of flights, isn't it?
Correct. So, for example, we have a local safety priority of sepsis, and if there was an event that related to sepsis, we put sepsis there. There's no very clear local or national priority that maps across that. Looking at that column, I'm not sure how useful it is, and I'll go back to the team. But it's pretty much good.
So interestingly, I think it's, if I may, I think it's a helpful. I think it is a helpful column because you can see a couple of things there that stick. So delayed diagnosis. There are a couple of serious events in there: delayed diagnosis and never events. You log those. So I think it's almost. I think that none is not a helpful category. I think the other categories are because they're just badges that stick.
Right, we'll have another appendix to describe what the options are in relation.
Okay.
I suppose on Joe's point, you know, when you have, so do you put low harm, no harm as well, isn't it?
So
that'd be useful.
So the daily triage meeting. So when somebody reports an incident, the reporter is giving their view of harm, and that is modified or adjusted at the daily triage. So radar contains those records.
I think there's lots of good information in here, but I suppose that left me sort of asking. It's almost in relation to those level 1 matters of how do you get assurance that the wider team are putting the learning into practice and being as, I suppose, hard on ourselves, if you like, as a deliverer, provider, as you are probably going to would want the team to be. That's the bit I wasn't quite sure I could walk away and think, yes, I now understand that we're buying all of this.
So I think one of the benefits is that lots of these things collect into themes. So therefore pressure ulcers, VT and various other things. We need to hold ourselves to account that we have a work programme that is informed by the incidents that we see, which is the ones that don't want us to think. Like if we prove through going to PISA, so if we're going to SIRG at our weekly meeting, we prepare some reports, come back, and things that do get detailed reports, we see the outcomes of that.
I think just on that point, I think it's work that we're currently doing around where does patient safety and learning sort of morph into quality improvement and audit, so that we get that cycle working really well. And I think at the moment we've got lots of quality improvement programs, and many of them aligned with thematic patient safety issues. But in the old system of doing things, you have an action plan after an incident, and then you the compliance to the action plan. I like that. So this is a very different way of embedding learning and evaluating whether learning has been embedded, taken place, and so that things have changed as a result. So I think we just need to formalise how we report that, capture it, and keep it on track.
It's a follow on to that, because my question was going to be on thematics, really, because this is a point in time, isn't it? What in front of us is a period in time. In terms of understanding, are these things continuous in the hospital? Really useful to understand, because in that learning loop, Kate, you've just touched on, that's where we start to improve the quality to reduce some of these incidents happening. So just understanding that, is there somewhere where we're capturing those things so we can keep looking at continuous improvement?
And I think those themes, in essence, when the patient safety team are seeing something that looks like it might be a theme, they're making a note of that. They're keeping an eye on things. They may then choose to take an approach that's slightly different, i.e. take 7 or 8 incidents that happen, low-level incidents, and have a piece of work.
Yes.
They may find that shit goes off the boil and there aren't any points. I think the key thing is, if things have clearly emerged into a theme and we haven't yet been able to look for root issues, then that would inform the quality priority for the year after cycle, where emerging themes are either taken on or not as priority. Again, the visibility that way.
Building on what Ian's saying there, I think if you stay on that page 5 and look at the top bit there, where it's saying we've got over 900 level 4 incidents where further information is required. It's how do we know, from Ian's point, whether there are 200 low-level incidents of issues, and getting those suitably triaged, well, not triaged because that's happened, but being clear about what those themes are.
So is that 913? I'm slightly worried they could sort of not being lost. Now they're not. So on the page there are 113 of those which are sitting there at the moment that the team are aware of and trying to manage that. I think the thing possibly that's missing, each of these incidents as they're reported is categorised in radar, is on the national system. We could quite easily bring reports saying there'd be this many falls, this many, this, that, and the other. It's quite a detailed look as to how often we do.
And I think the board might say that it wants to delegate that to the quality committee, and then we can note that here. But I think it is that bit of group, isn't it, that you're talking about, that we're all having a conversation about.
Yeah.
They're just trying to understand, obviously, where this report sits in context of the patient safety priorities as well. So those are the yearly priorities, but this report doesn't then relate the findings necessarily to those priorities, or does it?
Well, I think it recognises those priorities exist. For example, sepsis and medication errors and things are existing priorities.
Yeah.
What we need to find a way to do, and whether that's isn't monthly, maybe on the annual cycle, we need to be able to then link across that things have improved as a result, and or that programme has been modified as a result of the nuance of the instance.
Yeah. So, for example, we got deteriorating patients and diagnostic delays as priorities, and we got a couple of incidents in relation to those in this month's report.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how does that relate? And as I said, it might be that we have to look at the cycle of when it comes.
I mean, that's a good conversation to have at the quality committee.
Anything else on patient safety update? Thank you very much, Ian. I thought we should do that. Mag, Fiona.
So, this is a very brief paper just advising that the group that following the meeting has completed our full governance cycle, so it's just a verbal update today. So key focus for our maternity insurance group is around the maternity incentive scheme, formerly known as clinical mental scheme, like CNST, and then 10 key actions. And the progress against those actions is reviewed at every meeting alongside all our other governance metrics. Items to note from the last meeting, so I'll keep it reasonably brief. So we had a fast fetal abnormality screening programme, quality assurance visits earlier on in the year. And there's been some really good progress against the actions. All bar 2 have now been completed, and we will complete those 2 in good time against the timescale, which will give us some time to do some further quality assurance around that action plan, around meeting the requirements for that. We continue to work in partnership with the ICB and the LMNS around the role of the maternity neonatal voices partnership. We have a final agreement that's nearly in place now for that work.
That's all about embedding the voice of service users into decision making for maternity and neonatal services, and will be key to our hospital plans moving forwards. The other item to note from that meeting was we reviewed the Embrace perinatal mortality surveillance report data, and just requested some further report and look at the local position against those national recommendations and the national data, so that will be able to be referenced in future meetings. Outside of the maternity assurance group, on the 31st of July, we did have an unannounced CQC inspection. High-level feedback at the time of the visit was that the inspectors had found our staff to be really positive and engaging around coming in, and were very happy to meet and talk with them. They witnessed some really strong working relationships across all staff groups. They noted improvements following the last inspection, and they recognised that the organisation was on an improvement journey, and that processes were being improved upon. And they saw teach and treat well being practiced well by our medical colleagues. They, on the other kind of flip side of the feedback, they did notice that staff fed back to them that when they felt stretched, particularly around managing short-term absence, and there was a discussion with them about our escalation processes to maintain safety. We have a good, strong, robust plan, and we talked them through that process at our feedback. And they also referenced our cluttered environment, that staff often felt the environment required some improvement around the amount of equipment that's required as care modernises, which all blends into our new hospital.
So a couple of things. One, it was a delight to hear the CQC feedback to us that our maternity services estate and environment wasn't suitable, given that we are obviously on the list for a new hospital. So that was fearful. I think we still have similar concerns to a lot of organisations, and what many people will have read in the media about the competence of a regulator to appropriately assess services. And we have raised that formally now, because we are concerned about the skills and making sure that any CQC inspection is accurate. I think it's important that the board notes that we are one of many organisations who are interested in how the CQC is going to evolve.
I think it's really important for the teams, isn't it? And really important for us as a provider to really understand that.
Yeah.
One question, it's not really a question. I was also going to say that for future board, it would be really good to receive the MAG report and stuff. You've just joined, so that would be, I think, really important for us to kind of make sure we've got that in a timely way. But also, perhaps the board will be seeking that the quality committee can understand the timing and the process of that receiving of information and assuring the board, which I think is where we have been journeying over the last 6 months. Ian, I don't know if you want to say.
So I think there's this. So that's just from the paper. I'm no longer the executive director responsible for that. That is Fiona, and I'm grateful for her. Take that on. So I think we as a board need to make a decision, and possibly after the CQC report formally lands would be the time to do it, about whether we carry on the separate MAG as a subcommittee of the board, or whether we decide how we can split work between quality and.
I think for the board and for the NEDs as well, with Sarah attending now as the NED, I think that can be a decision that can be taken over the coming weeks about what the best way is to provide that assurance to the board around matters on MAG and what MAG currently does.
Yeah. I think specifically why we haven't got papers today is we made the active decision to cancel the August meeting due both to leave and also the flurry of activity that had been required by relevant people around CQC.
I think it's helpful for the board.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fiona. Performance report. We're looking at Helen.
You are.
Yeah. Okay. I'm working from one screen, so please shout if there's any hands up and any questions, because I can only see the paper, not the screen. But I will cover Emma's part of the portfolio as well. So just talking through, starting with the exec summary of trust performance. So we've seen a positive position recently in our performance. So our data here showed we were at 75.1% for ED for our performance against that transitional national target of 75.2%, and that was an improvement from our previous performance. In terms of sorry, apologise, I've just lost my place on the screen. Yeah, so open pathways has decreased slightly. I think just to flag to the board, really, that is, there's an expectation that open pathways reduce as we clear backlogs, and that certainly will be the case as we start to move forward. And as Jo said earlier, we are starting to see traction against our long waiting patients, so we are starting to move forward. We have a more detailed report around that this afternoon, and then hopefully we will pull that formally into the public board from next month onwards. I think it's worth flagging the challenges we currently face with our Cancer 62-day performance, where we are now flagging at 54.5% against that 85% national target. For that is, just to remind people, the standard there is 62 days from referral to treatment against a cancer pathway. That is a declining performance. Sally, our lead cancer nurse, does an excellent job of trying to manage and monitor those patients with her team. There is no doubt that the Salix Theatre programme has impacted some of our theatre capacity over the summer months, and diagnostics underlies some of those challenges. So you can also see there a deterioration in the faster diagnostic standard, down to 68.8 from a previous of 72.9. So both of those areas are challenged, and diagnostics is certainly an area of focus for us to develop our improvement trajectories against. So if I move to page 2 and just focus people around length of stay, criteria to reside, those are metrics that are going in the wrong direction for us. So you can see patients not meeting the criteria to reside, which is NHS speak for no longer need to be in acute hospital bed. So we've seen an increase from last month, and also we are running at more than double the threshold which we set ourselves. And then we have patients waiting over 14 and 21 days at the end of the month, again has increased. I'm sure this is an area that Faye will want to pick up Emma's mantle and move forward and focus on deeply. There is some system work that is required here, but I think it would be remiss of us not to recognise that an awful lot of these delays also sit around our internal processes. So we need to work hard internally and also with system partners, particularly as we move into the winter months, where these challenges are likely to deteriorate if we do not take some urgent action to deal with them. Ambulance handovers there. Our performance here is ranked against the nominal handovers to the emergency department less than 30 minutes, and you can see the numbers there. We've seen an improvement, and also 60 minutes where we've seen an improvement. There is a new piece of work coming from ambulance trusts across the country around ambulance handovers, that at 45 minutes, if we have not taken handover, the suggestion is they will do what they describe as drop and go. In other words, they will leave the patient in the emergency department and leave to attend to another patient at risk out in the community. So we, along with all other acute trusts, are working really hard to develop good plans to avoid any risk from that approach. And I'm sure you will get more updates on that coming forward as those plans improve. If I just move to our RTT performance, we have shown a slight improvement. It's still the latest published national figures took us to 38.3. Sadly, that does leave us not quite at the bottom, but we are only sitting ahead of 2 community trusts. We are doing an awful lot of work around that too, and hopefully you will see some step improvement in that in the coming months. We are also, we have developed, and we'll share those with you next month, our 65-week trajectories for clearance of those backlogs. The national driver was for them to be cleared by the end of September. I think there are approximately 20,000 patients nationally who are now expected not to clear, and we obviously are a proportion of those, and we will be working hard on our clearance trajectories around those, which we will report to you from next month onwards. I'm going to stop at that point, and because people have had an opportunity to read the papers, I'm very happy to take any queries and questions over any of the other metrics that people may have. That was just a real whistle-stop tour through the most significant ones.
Have any questions, Joe?
A couple of things to the board. I think questions always come out about, also, what are you doing about this position? Again, I'm conscious that we occasionally get some unhelpful headlines, so it's important that people know the facts, and we are significantly improving the waiting times of our patients by treating our longest waiters. That, not surprisingly, in the short term, reduces the cancer performance, because you end up treating more patients who have waited longer, and that impacts on your percentages. So we expect that will improve. We are doing a huge amount of work on diagnostics to make sure that we reduce those waiting times over the next couple of months, which again will significantly improve our position. And the conversation with the leadership team yesterday was how we move to delivering the constitutional targets and not focusing on the 65 weeks. So we know that our new government has specified moving to, in the life of this parliament, back to the constitutional target of 18 weeks. Our expectation as an organisation is that we will move to delivering that over the next couple of years. So that is our ambition, and as the chief exec, I can tell the board that we are doing a very good job presently at reducing waiting times, and that will play out in the figures fairly shortly.
Yes, that's comforting, because my question was really going to focus on what's going to more on the cancer, because I've seen a drop and already there's a gap between where we should be targeting to be and where we were in backwards. So if it's a short-term reaction to actually mitigating some of those long waiting time, patients, then that's fine. But if it's something that we're going to see as going to happen intermittently, then what do we do about that? So I think it almost answered my question, but it was more around understanding, particularly with those cancer patients, the drop we see the impact on again.
So just before Helen comes in, again, let's be clear, if you're a patient waiting for diagnosis or treatment of cancer, 24 hours is too long. So we're on no level are we belittling any of the waiting times that our population have to endure before receiving treatment. So that's the sort of most important thing, that any waiting time is important that we acknowledge and try and reduce. And I think the other thing for me is when I look at our performance, I'm looking at what we deliver by the end of the financial year. So one person's short term is another person's lifetime. And I think, again, the management of expectations for me is over the next few months, we will make significant strides in improvement. If you're waiting for a cancer diagnosis today, you want improvement today. So we do recognise that, but Helen wants to.
Helen.
So I just want, in terms of managing people's expectations, I think I have said this at board before, but just to reiterate, the way that cancer performance is calculated is very different to the way in which 18-week performance is calculated. So for 18 weeks, we look at the numbers of patients still sitting waiting. For cancer, we record performance at the point at which people have been treated. And therefore, if you develop a backlog of patients waiting longer than 62 weeks, which we have done, as you treat them, actually your performance will appear to deteriorate. And so the more important metric is actually, and one that is shared with us by Sally on a regular basis, is what is the size of the backlog, because we need to see that backlog reduce set against the actual performance.
I think my comment, Helen and Joe and I have talked about this, is that we want to be focused on our patients and doing the best steps for our patients. I think the piece that we've talked about, and I talked about some of the execs, is how you and we can give the board assurance that we are making that progress. It's kind of to Precious' point, really, of when do we get to a place where we go, right, we're absolutely clear that that's what the position looks like, and we are very clear about how we're going to take the steps forward. So I think for me, not for now, we'll talk about it perhaps later, but also bring to board in the coming months, is what does that look like in October or November that says to you, and you assure the board, I know this is stepping the right way, and in December it will look like this, and in January it will look like this. Not to then get there and go, well, actually what we didn't know was that this was going to happen. Now, we all know winter pressures will come, etc., but we know they're going to come. And I think that's the bit that the board needs assurance on, and the public needs assurance on, is we are on a trajectory. Yeah. Helen, you're going to come back on that, I think.
I was just going to say, I think it might be helpful. I've shared quite a lot of the planned care work with the board. Might be helpful for the next board to just bring a short paper that outlines some of the pressure points within the cancer services and what actions being taken and what those numbers look like.
In October.
Yep, happy to do that.
And I think the other thing you've discussed and we've discussed is that, we don't want to be just in the middle of the pack. So the point being around improving our position. We know we've got a challenge at the moment, but certainly Joe and I have talked about is we want Milton Keynes to be providing top quartile performance for its patients and its public. So the challenge is there, isn't it? And there's much to do. Yeah.
Can I just go back to the 18-week pathway? And that's, I think, I might be wrong, it was in June board probably that we discussed that we will be likely to beat our target for end of September, clearing the waiting times, or getting close to it anyway. So I just want to understand what's changed between June and now to that number's gone up instead of victories, and despite all the efforts that obviously that have been made.
So you can correct me when I get it wrong, Helen, but so at the start of in April, we said to the national team that initially we were expecting to have around about 350 patients waiting more than 65 weeks. We were then asked to close the financial gap in a meeting with the National Chief Exec, Director of Finance, Director of Ops. And we said at that point that the £10 million additional cost pressure that would impact on the trust would likely push our long waiting numbers from around about 350 up to somewhere between 600 and 700. We are expecting to achieve that 600 to 700, but all of the work that Helen is doing with the operation teams at the moment means that we can't quite guarantee that just yet. We've got another 28 days or whatever it is in order to achieve that. So our expectation is that we will deliver what we said we were going to deliver in April, which is not 18 weeks, by the way.
No,
It's-
60 weeks, yes.
65.
Of course, yes.
Thank you Helen, as well for that. I'm not looking at any other hands around the table. So we had a break on the agenda. We did fill up with coffee a while back. So I am going to give us a 5-minute loo break, but people need to be back at the table at 37.